Opened up. Thanks for joining us this evening. Skonati Majanja, spokesperson for Eskom, on that situation at Eskom. All right, let's take a quick break and come back and talk about competition. No, I'm told we have to talk about the competition within the South African economy right away. We have seen a number of reports where there are suggestions that companies are overcharging, taking advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on the economy. Now, the question many are asking is, when we need a policeman, do we have one in the Competition Commission? To help me answer that question, I am joined for this conversation by Makgale Mohlala, he's the head of Cartels at the Competition Commission, and Shaun van der Meulen, a partner at Weber. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Let's begin by getting the situation on the ground and where we stand. Makgale, if I can start with you. Do you have enough capacity to ensure that companies are not cheating us? I'm sorry I have to use that word.
Good evening to you and good evening to the viewers. We are certainly doing our best to discharge our mandate as per the legislation. The number of cases that we receive are very, very high. But as the authority responsible to police the economy, I think we have done very well with the limited resources that we have. Certainly, it can never be enough, but I think we've done quite well in resolving the majority of the cases that we have received around the area of price gouging.
Just give us a quick sense of the sectors where you're seeing this happening and the numbers involved, and whether there is indeed cause to be concerned about the conduct of companies.
Sure. At the moment, we are sitting at 1,592 cases that we have received since the start of the pandemic regarding price gouging. So, majority of these cases have been resolved. At the moment, we are just slightly above 300 pending investigations. So most of these cases are about the basic foodstuff, the potatoes, the cabbage, the spinach, as well as the sanitizers, the basic protective products such as masks, as well as sanitizers. So those complaints actually contribute the large number of complaints that we have received.
I think that's to be expected. Shaun, I want your thoughts in terms of the numbers that we are seeing, and then secondly, just on also whether consumers are overreacting here, because we do know that in large measure, most companies go about their businesses honestly.
Look, I think the first point is that the Commission has certainly done a laudable job in terms of its advocacy function in making the public aware of the cases that it's pursuing and making businesses aware that they're not going to get away with price gouging consumers, and making companies who are certainly thinking of doing that in relation to things like essential goods that are required by the public. They're causing, certainly the Commission's work is causing pause for thought and dissuading companies from engaging in that kind of conduct. There are obviously sort of question marks as to whether it's the correct function of a competition commission to be pursuing what is arguably a consumer protection function. There is obviously a consumer protection commission that we have, although it does seem to be being very quiet and potentially not fulfilling its mandate as it should, which is why the competition commission, as Makgale has said, has been the policeman who's going after and investigating these cases. Yeah. But it does raise question marks as to whether it is in the Commission's purview to pursue price gouging cases.
Yeah, I want him to respond to that, but before he does, Shaun, I just wanted to know from you, are you surprised by the numbers we're talking about here? 1,592 complaints does sound like a big number. And then secondly, if we look at those numbers, does that suggest that our companies are dishonest?
Well, I mean, I'm not surprised by the numbers, and quite frankly, I'd imagine that there are many more companies out there who are effectively raising prices in response to the pandemic. I mean, I think one needs to appreciate that in tough times, all businesses and many people, whether rightly or wrongly, are going to try and pursue opportunities. And where they see that there's a gap in the market to exploit consumers, rightly or wrongly, many companies are going to try and take that gap. I suppose it's yes, it's a question of whether they are acting ethically or morally, and whether that's something they should do, or whether that's a legal matter.
Yeah, Makgale, as Sean knows, should this be within your purview, or should this go to the consumer protection authorities?
Well, we think it is within our purview. We think that Section 8 of the Competition Act makes it clear that we are responsible to investigate the excessive pricing cases. So these are excessive pricing cases within the ambit of Section 8 of the Competition Act. And of course, the Consumer Commission also has a role to play there, as they are responsible to protect consumers. And our view has actually been upheld by the Competition Tribunal in two matters that we prosecuted under Section 8 for price gouging. The issue is, if you want to make a suggestion that the Competition Authority is not the relevant body to deal with price gouging, whilst price gouging in itself is a species of excessive pricing, who will then be responsible to prosecute firms for excessive pricing? The Consumer Commission doesn't prosecute firms for excessive pricing. It prosecutes them for behaviors that are untoward to customers and consumers. So we are of the view that this is firmly within our ambit, and the tribunal so far has agreed with us that price gouging is a species of excessive pricing. Therefore, it falls within the ambit of Section 8 and consequently within the mandate of the competent authorities.
Yeah. Sean, quickly, I wanted to ask you about strengthening the competition law. Is it adequate in your view, number one? Number two, I've always been troubled by this arrangement where the Competition Commission comes to an agreement with the offending party, they pay a fine and they walk away, and who knows, they come back and they try it again. So the question has to be then, is the law strong enough to deter people from doing this? I know there's that 10% that's fined on the overall turnover of the business, or is it of the offending section of the business? I'm not too sure. I'm no lawyer. You are, Sean?
Yes. Well, I think just the first point, which goes to the points Makgale was making, is that I think the law does need to be strengthened if there's a need by government to regulate price gouging. I mean, Makgale has pointed out that the Commission and the Tribunal have taken a view that price gouging is a species of excessive pricing. But nowhere in our Act does the law specifically mention, or our Competition Act specifically, does it mention or have any provisions relating to price gouging. And, I mean, it's a very technical and complex matter, but, I mean, the theory and legal and economic principles underlying excessive pricing relate to sort of a long-term or non-temporary ability to price excessively. What we're dealing with price gouging is sort of a temporary behavior in the context of a pandemic, where companies are sort of taking advantage of a gap in the market to exploit consumers. Yeah. And I do agree that that's not necessarily correct, and that there should be some legal mechanism to prosecute firms for doing that. Whether that should be done under the existing Competition Act in Section 8 as it's currently written or not, I think is a debate. And I do agree that the law, if the Commission and government wants to regulate price gouging, the laws should be developed, and that should be made as sort of an express prohibition or express prohibited conduct that can then be properly prosecuted. And I think we are going to see a number of debates and appeals around the two cases that the Makgale has referred to. The parties there have already indicated that they're going to be appealing those decisions because they don't believe the tribunal's decision is correct. And I think, this matter will sort of play out in the courts for a number of months or years until we get some sort of clarity. So yes, certainly there is a need for greater certainty and development of the law.
Absolutely, no question about that. This debate is only beginning, and hopefully if we contribute in any way in the development of that law, we shall be very glad indeed. Makgale, thanks very much for joining us this evening. He is the head of Cartels at the Competition Commission, and we're also joined by Sean van der Meulen, a partner at Weber Wenzel, all from Johannesburg. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. And that's Closing Bell South Africa for today. Thank you for watching. It was a day on which we